Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at how universities are run in Poland.
Yeah, the system is quite fascinating.
And we have some really interesting data to share with you today from a huge research project.
Over 17,000 academics across 11 European countries,
Wow.
including almost 4,000 responses from Poland.
That's quite a bit of data to work with.
It is, and it's all thanks to a paper called The Unfading Power of Collegiality, University Governance in Poland in a European Comparative and Quantitative Perspective,
Oh my gosh.
published in the International Journal of Educational Development.
So with all of that data, what's the big takeaway for Poland specifically?
Well, when we look at the data, it really paints this picture of Polish universities being much more like a traditional community of scholars
Yes.
than really any other Western European university system.
So for our listeners who didn't spend all their time in lecture halls, what does this community of scholars idea actually mean?
Imagine a university where the pursuit of knowledge and truth is the absolute top priority, and where decisions are made internally, guided by shared values and intense peer review.
So not a lot of outside influence.
Right. Very little influence from the outside world.
So kind of like a self-governing think tank.
Exactly. It's this idea that scholarship thrives when it's free from external pressures.
That makes sense.
And the research shows that Polish academics are actually far more likely to hold this view than their counterparts in other European countries.
So I guess that kind of raises a concern, though, about Polish universities being a bit of an ivory tower, right? Isolated from the practical needs of society.
Right, that's a key question.
Yeah.
And, the data does suggest a potential disconnect.
Okay.
For example, Polish academics are much less likely to see scholarship as needing to have practical applications or needing to solve societal problems.
So they're just churning out all this theoretical research that just sits on a shelf somewhere?
Well, the research also found that Polish research is significantly less applied or commercially oriented compared to other countries.
Oh, wow.
And Polish academics also report having the least amount of influence from external sponsors on their research.
So they're sticking to their principles.
Yeah, all signs point to a system that prioritizes pure academic pursuit above everything else.
But that makes you wonder how this is all going to play out in the long run.
Right.
Especially with so much emphasis these days on universities contributing to innovation and economic growth.
It is kind of an interesting tension.
Yeah.
Because while Polish universities seem to be clinging to this community of scholars ideal, there are actually reforms happening that are pushing them in a different direction.
So is someone trying to shake things up?
Well, it appears that way. And these reforms seem to be aligning with what Johan P. Olsen calls the university as an instrument for shifting national political agendas.
Okay, so instead of this free-flowing pursuit of knowledge, they're being viewed more as tools to achieve specific national goals.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And the focus shifts towards research that has clear societal or economic benefits.
Which, of course, raises questions about academic freedom.
Right.
And who gets to decide what research is actually valuable?
Huge debate.
So where does Poland actually stand on this spectrum of government influence? I mean, are these reforms actually taking hold?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Despite these reforms, Polish universities actually have the lowest level of government influence on academic decisions out of all the countries studied.
What?
They even have this index of government influence that they use to measure this.
Hold on. So they're being pushed toward this more instrumental model.
Right.
But they haven't actually budged in terms of government control.
Not according to the data.
Okay, so what about things like commercializing their research?
Well, it's not just government influence either.
Okay.
They also score really low on the index of academic entrepreneurialism,
Interesting.
which means there's not a lot of pressure to commercialize their research or partner with industry.
It's like they're holding their ground, like, we're going to do things our way. How does this all play out in terms of actual decision-making, though? I mean, within the university,
Right.
who really calls the shots?
Well, the research also looked at the influence of faculty committees and boards on university decisions,
Okay.
which they call collegiality.
Gotcha.
And guess what?
What?
Poland has the second highest index of collegiality in all of Europe.
Wow, so professors have a lot of power in Poland.
They really do.
Interesting.
They have the most influence in approving new programs and evaluating teaching.
That's a lot of power.
Plus, they also have a significant say in choosing new faculty, promotions, and even budget priorities.
Wow, it sounds like a pretty good deal for these Polish academics.
You'd think so.
All this power and influence.
But Here's the thing.
What's that?
When asked directly about top-down management style and collegiality in decision-making, Polish academics gave surprisingly average responses.
Really? So they have all this power, and they're not even that excited about it.
It seems that for them, high collegiality is simply the norm.
Oh.
Not necessarily seen as positive or negative.
Just how things are done.
Yeah, but there's another layer to this we need to explore,
Okay.
which is the generational divide.
Oh, interesting.
What about the newer professors just entering the system?
Yeah. How do they feel about all of this?
Right. Do they feel the same way?
That's what we'll find out next time on our deep dive
Stay tuned.
into Polish universities.
That's right. Well, that's where things get even more interesting. You know, the research actually found a stark difference in how much influence full professors and new entrants feel like they have in Poland.
Ah, so the newbies don't really have much say. Kind of like the classic story of the seasoned veterans running the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
New entrants report feeling much less influential when it comes to shaping academic policies at all levels of the university.
Well, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
You would think that they would be the ones who would be pushing for change.
Yeah.
Wanting to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's not what the research found, right?
This is where it gets really surprising.
Okay.
Despite feeling less powerful, new entrants actually have a more positive view of the current university organization than full professors.
Whoa, wait a minute. So you're saying they feel less empowered but are more content with the system. How does that even work?
It's a head-scratcher, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can only speculate as to why that might be. Maybe new entrants, being fresh from other sectors, have a different perspective on what a good working environment looks like.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just happy to have a stable job in academia.
Yeah, or maybe there's something about that community of scholars model that really resonates with them,
Yeah.
even if it means they don't have as much individual power right away. Maybe they see the value in prioritizing scholarship above all else. I don't know. Makes you think.
It really does, and it really highlights just how complex this issue is. You have these deeply ingrained values clashing with external pressures for change.
Right.
And then you have this generational divide where the newcomers are actually quite happy with the status quo,
Yeah.
despite not having much power. It's a fascinating dynamic, for sure.
So, I mean, what does all this mean for Polish universities then? Are they clinging to the past, or are they on to something that the rest of the world has kind of forgotten about?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Let's take a step back and consider what we were talking about earlier regarding the community of scholars model. The research shows that Polish universities are much more likely to embrace this traditional and maybe even idealistic view of scholarship. They're less focused on practical applications or catering to external demands. So is this a strength, a weakness, or a little bit of both? What do you think?
I mean, it's tough to say. On the one hand, it's kind of inspiring to see them holding onto this vision of pure intellectual exploration, creating a space where knowledge is valued for its own sake,
Yeah.
free from the pressures of the marketplace or political agendas.
I agree. There's something quite noble about that.
Yeah. But then on the other hand, this disconnect from societal needs could be seen as a weakness, right?
Right.
Are Polish universities adequately preparing their students for the challenges of, this rapidly changing world? Are they contributing enough to solving real-world problems?
It's almost like they're stuck in this tug of war between tradition and the demands of the modern world.
Yeah.
And then the responses from these new entrants suggest that they might actually be more open to changes than we might expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So they could become a driving force in reshaping the future of Polish academia then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what should we be watching for as this unfolds? What are the big questions that need to be answered here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess one key question is how the balance of power will shift between the senior faculty and new entrants, right?
Right.
Will this new generation maintain this positive view that they have of the system as they gain more experience and potentially, face more roadblocks? Will they become champions of this community of scholars model? Or will they start to push for maybe a more engaged and responsive university?
Right. And then there's also the question of how the government will navigate this complex landscape. Will they continue to push for reforms, even if they face resistance from the old guard? Will they try to find some sort of middle ground that preserves academic freedom while also encouraging universities to be more responsive to societal needs?
Yeah, it's a delicate balancing act for sure.
It is. And as we've seen from our deep dive into the data, Poland is really in a unique position to grapple with these issues. They have this strong tradition of collegiality, combined with this new generation of academics who are more open to change. It creates a really fertile ground for innovation and experimentation.
Absolutely. It really does feel like we're at a pivotal moment in Polish higher education. The decisions that they make today are really going to have a ripple effect for years to come. It's going to be really interesting to see which path they choose.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. It's like they're holding this precious artifact, this community of scholars model, and they're trying to figure out if it belongs in a museum or if it can still be, a vital part of the modern world.
It's a great analogy. And remember, there's no one-size-fits-all answer here.
Right.
Each model of university governance has its own pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
The community of scholars, with its focus on academic freedom and rigorous peer review, can lead to some incredible discoveries and deep intellectual exploration.
It's like a protected space for big ideas to just flourish without the pressure to immediately turn them into something, practical and profitable.
Exactly. But the potential downside is that isolation.
Right.
If universities become too detached from the needs of society, their work can lose relevance and impact.
Okay, and that's where that more instrumental model comes in, right?
Precisely.
Where universities are seen as key players in solving real-world problems.
Exactly. This approach can really boost a university's engagement with industry, with government, with the community at large.
Right, but I can see how focusing too much on practical applications could, stifle creativity, lead to a more narrow view of what research is even worth pursuing.
It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
The balance between preserving academic freedom and ensuring that universities are contributing to the greater good.
It sounds like Poland, with its strong collegial traditions and this new generation of academics who are open to these different ideas, they're in a unique position to really explore, these different approaches.
They really are at a crossroads. It's going to be really fascinating to see how they navigate this tension between tradition and change.
Yeah.
Will they create a hybrid model that combines the best of both worlds?
Yeah, maybe they'll become a model for other countries who are, grappling with these similar challenges.
Right.
Who knows, maybe this community of scholars idea, updated for the 21st century, could be the key to unlocking, a new era of innovation and progress.
That would be something. It just goes to show you can find inspiration in the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of Polish universities. We've covered a lot of ground today. But as always, we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, to dig a little deeper into the research, and to form your own conclusions.
Yes, keep asking those tough questions, challenge assumptions, and never stop learning. That's what makes these deep dives so rewarding.
And until next time, keep diving.